welcome back. I'm back from New York. It's a normal week. It's Zain Bando. This is Bando's Breakdowns, episode 8. I'm so excited to be back talking with you guys about all the news and notes in the world of sports as we do every single week between 30 and 45 minutes. It's me, myself, and I, and as unfiltered as you can possibly get. So if you like sports opinions and what just from a singular person, either on this network or elsewhere, as you're scrolling through your various podcasts, you have come to the right place. We have a whole lot to get to today in the world of sports, from the NBA Finals to the Stanley Cup Final, some combat at sports news and notes, and some other things around the sporting calendar. But before we get to that and so much more, I just wanted to quickly remind you guys to be sure or to like and subscribe to the Empty the Bench podcast network on YouTube and across social media at youtube.com/ETB network. You can follow the network across social media at ETB network, as the YouTube home is slowly but surely approaching 1,000 subscribers, as we are very slowly approaching the 800 mark. So if you guys like the content that you hear today, hey, please be sure to if it's a like, please be sure to comment, and please be sure to hit the notification bell. That way you don't miss anything between the shows that I do or other shows on the network, as we are slowly but surely approaching the dog days of summer. That way you won't miss a single minute of any of the action that we have going on across the network, and so much more, as it is a very busy time for everyone here. And speaking of busy times, we are in the middle of the NBA Finals, which means this podcast is presented by Playback. So I just wanted to go through, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with with Playback and sort of everything and with which it's all about, I can tell you more so about it and so much more. So presented by Playback, watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience, from playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities that you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. And of course, just as a reminder, the NBA Finals are on the Empty the Bench podcast network. As tonight, actually, the night that this is going to air, it's going to be Game 3 between the Mavericks and the Celtics, as the Celtics cling to a 2-0 series lead, as the series will shift to Dallas for Games 3 and 4. So be sure to stay tuned with all of the network coverage across Playback and all of the other shows in regards to the NBA Finals, as well as Game 3 on Wednesday and Game 4 on Friday. Both are from Dallas. So we are now going to get into the show. We have a very, very packed episode this week, and we're going to get things started with Zain's overview. And as you know, this is just a simple segment where I'm going to go through just kind of the different things that we are going to be discussing on today's show. And for those of you who know the show and you understand the lineup and just kind of how how things run, so we're gonna get into it, and we're gonna discuss the Stanley Cup Finals, the NBA Finals, the NFL preseason schedule that was just released. We're going to discuss the statement that was made by Team USA regarding Caitlin Clark's omission from the Olympics team that's going to be taking place later this summer. And of course, we're going to be going over just a brief preview, of course, of UFC Vegas 93 from the APEX, headlined by Perez and Tatsuro Taira. And of course, we're going to be going over Gervonta Tank Davis versus Frank Martin. If you want more extensive analysis on those two fights, be sure to check out episode 87 of the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and myself, as we broke down those two fights. And that episode aired last night, so be sure to go check it out, as well as the Tough Enough stream, where we went over episode 2, and of course that's headlined between Grasso and Shevchenko. So now let's get into the meat and potatoes of the show. So we're going to start out with the Stanley Cup Final first. So as we know, the Florida Panthers are taking on the Edmonton Oilers. The Florida Panthers are looking to in back-to-back or looking to secure another Stanley Cup title. But before they do that, they have to finish out the series against Edmonton as they took care of business in Game 2. The final score was 4-1, and Edmonton has just really struggled. Their power plays really struggled, and it seems like Florida has just really dominated when it mattered most. It was a close second period, a close third period. They had to rally from an early deficit in the first period, but came back to win 4-1. And I think that home ice is super important. And another interesting stat coming out of these first two games is that the team that wins games 1 and 2 of the Stanley Cup Final has a 93% chance to close out the series. So I feel like Edmonton being in the position that they're in, it's going to be easier said than done going to Alberta, where Rogers Place has treated them well, and Connor McDavid's going to have to step up, in their goaltending just has to be better. It's as simple as that. You could argue that Edmonton had a tougher road to the Stanley Cup Final compared to the Florida Panthers, but nonetheless, it'll be a very interesting next two games, and if Florida can win Game 3, presumably tonight, it'll be very interesting to see kind of what goes on there, and if they'd be able to close out the series in Game 4. And I just wanted to quickly correct myself. It's not tonight that the game is taking place. So it'll actually be Thursday night instead of Wednesday. But nonetheless, it feels like a stranglehold on the series there, but it'll be very interesting to see how everything kind of plays out and how it continues. But nevertheless, it definitely is a must-win game in Edmonton for Game 3, and on Thursday, and potentially a must-win situation in Game 4 if they want to keep the series alive. Transitioning over to the NBA Finals, we obviously have the Boston Celtics taking on the Dallas Mavericks, and this has been a really exciting series. It's very clear that Boston, even though they do still have their primary scorers, it's been interesting to see just kind of how they move the ball in various different places. They've really kept Luka Doncic in check, despite him in Game 2 scoring 32 points. He was only held to 44% from 3-point territory, which is very unlike Luka. And then of course the winning block to seal it from Derek White. Again, it was a 105-98 score, where really kind of made a statement that the Celtics are for real, and that potentially going to Dallas isn't going to be a problem for them. But I think Dallas thrives under pressure, and these next two games are going to be very, very interesting. Obviously, Game 3 is a must win scenario in Dallas, as well as Game 4. An interesting stat with this series as well. I talked about the percentage of chances of teams that go up 2-0 in a series in the Stanley Cup Final. In the NBA Finals, it's very similar. It's 86.1% of teams that win in the first two games going to win the series. So Dallas will have their backs against the wall there. But if they can take away the Celtics' perimeter shooting and force a couple of turnovers late, they may have a chance to win Game 3. But something tells me this series either ends in 5 or 6. I really do think that Boston is took the wind out of Dallas' sails. I noticed some experts and pundits, maybe thought that Dallas would steal one of the first two games, but it very well doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. And to me, it's just very interesting to see the Celtics team play together. I think that these guys aren't necessarily concerned about individual stats. At least Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum they're more concerned about winning. And you have to take that from Joe Mazzulla's team, considering that this team is comprised of veterans and guys that still don't have a ton of playoff experience. So the Celtics team is very fun to watch, and I'm very much looking forward to the rest of the series, as well as the next two games, because when you change court venues, if you will, the series can get a little interesting, and you might end up seeing some shipping as we get into games 3 and 4 before potentially a do or die Game 5 scenario, assuming that the Mavericks at least win one of these two games, because the last thing you want to see happen is a sweep in a series like this, considering how much talent is on both sides for both of these teams. So it's something to monitor as we move into the next two games. Again, games 3 and 4 will transition to American Airlines in Dallas before moving back to Boston for Game 5. All right, nevertheless, now we're going to move on to a story that I think has been making some headway for a couple of days now, and that was when the news broke that Caitlin Clark uh, has been left off of Team USA Women's Basketball. I know that a producer that's currently recording the show did make a short video regarding the Caitlin Clark situation and his thoughts on it. So I wanted to briefly run through a story with you guys. It was written by Glenn Hill of the Washington Post, and it um basically talks about how USA Basketball came to the decision to omit Caitlin Clark from the team, which I think has made a lot of newer fans, of the sport of women's basketball, well, not very happy given her stature and the presence that she brings to the sport. So here is part of the quote. That was addressed by Jennifer Rizzotti. Her official title is the USA Basketball Women's National Team Committee Chair, and here's part of the quote. And it says, obviously, I want today. This is referring to the date that this is being recorded, not the date that this episode's airing. It says, obviously, I want today to mostly be about the players that made the team, but there's no avoiding the conversation around who didn't. So I'm happy to address it. Obviously, we know the success that Clark had in college, and he's had a tremendous start to the WNBA season so far. But essentially, it was the committee's job to pick the 12 based on their selection criteria. And as much as you want to maybe make conversation around how we should have considered TV viewership or jersey sales or popularity, that wasn't the purview of the committee to have these discussions. The selection criteria was very clear. And I know I'm going to get more into this in a little bit, but I just completely disagree with USA Basketball statement here. It is totally off base. You mean to tell me that even though you want the 12 best players to compete on Team USA, which I totally understand, if you want newer people to tune into this portion of the Olympics, and as we know, there are a ton of sports that the Olympics are gonna be centered around. If you want more people to tune into the Olympics, and especially this portion, Caitlin Clark has to be on Team USA. It doesn't matter if she plays 6 minutes a game. It doesn't matter if she averages, or whatever it is, 13 points and 8 rebounds and 3 assists, as an example. I feel like if you want to grow the game and you want to grow it on a national level, she is the kind of person that can bring those eyeballs. So I totally understand their perspective, but at the same time I don't, because sometimes in professional sports leagues have had to do this, especially during COVID, where it went against the letter of the law. The UFC being the example of putting events on during COVID. They did things that were very controversial, and some fans loved it and some fans didn't. This is another one of those situations where I think she was such a rare talent in college. So many people are interested in everything that she currently does, that I feel like you can go against the grain every so often and maybe make a couple people happy. And I feel like this is a situation where Team USA dropped the ball. No hope and intended here, but I just feel like this is only going to motivate Clark to get better in the years to come, to get her spot and be invited onto this team, because there's no doubt in the next 4 to 5 years, given her trajectory, that she will be on the team in some capacity. So I totally disagree with Team USA's decision. I think it's a very, very off-putting, and I think it puts fans that were on the fence of maybe watching Team USA, maybe thinking about, oh, I want to watch gymnastics, or I want to watch USA boxing or something, because if you don't have a name of that caliber, a name that's a household name everywhere, not just in the women's basketball niche, I think it's a big turnoff. So those are my thoughts. And I think Team USA really missed the mark and went more PR heavy instead of being really honest about why they didn't think that Clark deserved to be on the team. But that's neither here nor there. Very, very, very very disappointing in regards to Team USA standpoint there. And speaking of the UFC, I just mentioned it a couple of minutes ago, but we have another card this weekend. It's UFC Vegas 93. It's taking place from the UFC APEX in Las Vegas, headlined by a very critical flyweight fight with potential title implications on the line. Alex Perez versus Tatsuro Taira, who it's his undefeated record on the line. Very, very interesting fight. We picked this fight on the MMA Outsiders earlier this week, but I'm going with Taira by decision. I just think there's a ton of hype around him. There's obviously a chance that he might even be better everywhere than Perez, but at the very least, he brings something to the flyweight division that I think is very exciting, and I think is very underappreciated, and um that's the fact that he's a finisher. He's someone that can go and make fights exciting and make fights devastating. I mean, think about it. Let's see, he's got two wins by TKO, particularly in the second round, and of course he's got nearly 50% of his wins by submission. He's currently 5-0 in the UFC, and his last win took place against Carlos Hernandez, which is not a bad win and by any stretch. He had a couple of cancellations and a couple of spouts of inactivity, but nonetheless, he's someone that's very exciting and someone to watch. Looking at Alex Perez, he currently sits with a 25-8 record in MMA, currently sitting at 7-4 in the UFC, and is coming off of a really nice win in a fight that a lot of people didn't really give him a chance. He's Nicolau is a stud. He's an up and coming guy in the division as well, so he's someone to look out for. So if you're a hardcore UFC, and this is a fight that I think a lot of people should be excited about. But if you're someone that only tunes in for a pay per view every couple of months, and this is not the fight for you. But I will say this: if you are a newer MMA fan that's trying to really understand the sport and the optics, this is a great fight because these are two high level flyweights that have a chance to be world champions. So again, I will take Tyra in the main event, and here it's done. I think it's a very entertaining fight, and it's just a quick heads up. With my UFC Louisville predictions a week ago, I went 7-7, which puts me at 134 wins on the year for UFC. So I'm hoping to have a real big bounce back week as we move into the final 2 weeks of June. Just down the street at the MGM Grand Garden Arena, we have a very huge boxing match between Gervonta Tank Davis and Frank Martin. This is going to be a great fight. I think a lot of people have been excited to see Tank Davis fight since he competed a couple of times last year, most notably against Ryan Garcia. And when you compare both of these guys' resumes, they just aren't comparable. When Frank Martin is undefeated himself, but when you look at Tank Davis, and as I just alluded to, he's fought better competition. He's a better power puncher, and he'll be looking to go in and make things ugly for Martin. Martin, may end up winning maybe a round or two, but Tank Davis should be able to stifle him into the later rounds. I like Tank Davis by a round 9 KO TKO, but I think it should be an interesting fight nonetheless. Just considering that there's a lot of hype on Tank and a lot of guys that he could maybe fight. In the future, there's some big money fights out there for him in several divisions. So he's definitely someone to watch, and this definitely he should be a great fight. Just as a quick reminder on how you can purchase the fight and how you can bet on the fight. So according to USA Today, is taking Gervonta Davis, and of course Tim Bradley and Earl Spence Jr. are in the agreement. Those are two guys that really know their stuff. So let me give you guys a bit of a run through here. So the fight is scheduled to begin ring walks tentatively 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. This fight can be streamed on Amazon Prime pay-per-view, Triller internationally, as well as ppv.com. So if you want to hear Jim Lampley and Lance Pugmire, a long-time, very well credited columnist with the LA Times and several other places, you can do so there, and that does not require a subscription. So it's something to keep in mind there. we again 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific on Saturday, so it'll run at the same time as Tyra versus Perez, which the main card will begin at 10 p.m. Eastern with the prelims beginning at 7. And the current odds right now, Tank Davis is a huge favorite at minus 700. Frank Martin is currently sitting at plus 480, and this is cur- this is courtesy of several different outlets, but USA Today used FanDuel for these. So please, if you are planning to bet on this fight, bet responsibly. And if I were to bet on this fight, I would be taking Tank Davis at a prop, because laying a minus 700 favorite is not really going to win you that much money. So take a look at the prop route for this fight to either finish inside the distance or Tank Davis by knockout, because I think Frank Martin, even remotely knocking down Tank Davis, is going to be way easier said than done, and more than likely will not happen. So those are the two major fights taking place from Las Vegas on Saturday, which I think are going to be the two major fights of the weekend, with this one arguably overtaking UFC. So just something to keep in mind there. And speaking of UFC, we're gonna jump into Zain Zinger, where I go on a little bit of a rant, and the first topic and the major topic that I want to get into is the WWE. So they had an event over the weekend, and it was WWE. I'm pretty sure it was NXT Battleground or something like that, and it was held at the UFC APEX. Tom and I briefly spoke on this on the MMA Outsiders a couple of weeks back, and they both agreed that this was going to be a regular occurrence from the WWE, that you were going to start seeing WWE events at the Apex. And a little more than 700 people showed up to the event, and it worked awesome on stream. And it just got me thinking that, the UFC could really learn to take notes from the WWE seating arrangements. If you watch a UFC Apex card now, there's very few people in the building. You have to either know someone within the promotion. It's in it only, or you can pay a UFC VIP experience via on location, which is thousands of dollars to attend. And I just personally think that with how long the UFC has used the Apex, since about the bulk of 2020 or so, there needs to be more of an incentive. Again, as I just alluded to, this is UFC Vegas 93. We're almost coming up on UFC Vegas 100, and I can guarantee you the UFC Vegas 100 will not be as big as the original UFC 100, which took place in July of 2009. Why am I saying that? I feel like if you're going to use the Apex for these smaller fight night shows where you're spending less money to go on the road and you're very selective of places you go to, i.e., Louisville and St. Louis, you might as well make the UFC Apex experience a little bit more worthwhile. So I think what the WWE did by spreading everybody out, making everybody feel like they were close to the action, and making everybody feel like the tickets were more than affordable, which it seemed to me, based on the people that were there and based on Twitter and stuff like that, that they were. So just extremely interesting stuff, and something that I feel like is not being talked about enough is the seating arrangement, because I personally think that that the UFC could really do something about it, especially if they're planning to do 5 or 7 Apex shows in a 10-week span. It just will make a couple of them feel bigger, and by doing so, putting on bigger main events with more notable names might help. They're obviously not going to do pay-per-views there anymore, because now they're fully back on the road and they have to do pay-per-views in actual venues. But at the very least, you sort of have a framework. And speaking of the UFC, this is a red alert. This is really sad. I can't believe that I have to talk about this, but UFC 303 is in jeopardy again. At the time that we were recording this, a tweet was revealed by Ariel Helwani earlier in the day. I'm pretty sure, or on the day that we're recording this is Tuesday. So on Tuesday afternoon at about 3:30 Eastern time, this was the latest on UFC 303. So it says, around the time last week, all the anxiety surrounding the UFC 303 main event between Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler seemed to start to dissipate. By Wednesday, no more feelers about replacements were being sent out. All systems seem to be a go. Um, all systems seem to be a go again. Later in the week, Chandler did an interview with the Pivot about it being all good, and on Saturday, UFC was promoting it again. on the ABC Fight Night telecast. There was a scare about the fight being off, and the scare appeared to be no more. But since this morning, multiple sources are now saying feelers are being sent out again for June 29th for replacement and or new fights. In short, there seems to be a pessimism all over again regarding the status of the 303 main event. Actually, even more pessimism, it seems, than on Monday last week after the pressure was canceled at the last minute. Is this insurance, due diligence, emergency replacement mode? Remains to be seen. It's all developing again, but it doesn't appear as though we are out of the woods either way. You just yet more to come, and hopefully a definitive answer one way or the other in short order. So I just want to make it clear, as someone who has two journalism degrees, for those of you that are freaking out, why is Ariel Hawani not saying the real reason why this fight is potentially off, is because a duty of being a journalist and a duty of being a good one is to always, no matter what, protect your sources. So if his source, which obviously he won't name because he's a good journalist, because if he does, I or anybody else in the same field can take that source and use it to our advantage. He's gonna go, and he's gonna make sure that he's protected to ensure that the more that this source gives him other scoops about other things that may occur in the future, the those things like that, those things that don't get leaked out, and therefore his reputation wouldn't be at stake again. But here's a quick theory as to why I think something has gone awry. There's been several pictures and videos posted of McGregor and Chandler training, and one of those photos was at an ankle foot specialist in an undisclosed location. And to me, something tells me that his ankle or his shin has been re-aggravated in some way, or he's overly worried about injuring it again. That could be one scenario. Another scenario is that there's two fights remaining on his contract. He wants those two fights to be the two biggest, most worthwhile fights he can make because he already has, ownership stake in BKFC. There's been other rumors in years past that he might go over and box and do other things that are combat related but not UFC related. There's a lot of different variables to this, but I think the big thing that we need to be wary of is that it is Conor McGregor. Everybody said it, even my fellow host Tom Albano has said that he won't believe that this fight is really happening until those two are in the cage, and we have less than 3 weeks to go until the fight, and we still don't know if the main event's going to be on. So I guess my biggest piece of advice is, if you are holding a ticket, if you are holding a hotel room, please still hold them. It is International Fight Week for a reason. There's no way that International Fight Week won't be big, even with or without Conor McGregor. And I do think that for those of you that were planning to go to Vegas for the first time, you should definitely still go, because going to a UFC event in Las Vegas, regardless of who the main event is unmatched. So I guess my feeling on this is it's a little worrisome. I'm a little worried those are the only theories that I can really think of, but at the very least, there's still 3 weeks to go. There's still a little bit of time, but the clock is still ticking. So this is something to definitely monitor. I'm still on the side of 70-30 that the fight will happen, but who knows? By the time I record episode 9 of this very show, my feelings could very well have changed. So never know. But in a very interesting, feed, or as we move very close to the UFC 303 June 29th at T-Mobile Arena in Vegas. Quickly transitioning to a topic that I forgot to talk about, and that is that the NFL has released its preseason schedule. There's going to be 21 games broadcasted across several networks over the course of the preseason schedule. Excuse me, just to briefly go through what the games are going to be. Starting on Thursday, August 1st, we're going to have the NFL Hall of Fame game in Canton between the Bears and the Texans. In preseason week 2, that's going to be nationally televised. We'll have the 49ers hosting the New Orleans Saints, and then in week 3 we have a triple header. Thursday and then 2 Sunday tilts. We've got the Colts taking on the Bengals, the Cardinals taking on the Broncos, and of course the Patriots taking on the Commanders. For context, as I said, there were 2 Sunday games. The very first game takes place on that Thursday, and there's the week by week schedule as well. So just to briefly let you guys know, there's 2 games in week 1. and on Thursday, 3 games in week 1 on Friday, and then a plethora of games on Saturday. That's going to be the main format for every single week of the preseason schedule leading up to the NFL schedule, of course, in September when the Chiefs raise the banner and host and host the Ravens for the national TV game on the Thursday night. So it should be a very fun NFL season, and definitely when we're talking about preseason schedules already being released, that means that the NFL season is slowly but surely approaching, which is very exciting. Now we're going to move into the end to look at just a quick reminder. In the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Finals, continue to look out for when those games are going to be taking place. So just as a brief reminder, we got game 3 tonight. That's at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We got game 40 on Friday, or excuse me, game 4 on Friday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. And then of course these are all if necessary for the time being. We're gonna come back with game 5 on Monday, June 17th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, potentially a game 6 on Thursday, June 20th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and then finally, if need be, game 7 on that Sunday, June 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern. So a lot to be excited about on the NBA front, as well as the NHL front. As I went over earlier in the show, we have the Panthers clinging to a 2-0 series lead over the Oilers. So continuing on here, as I alluded to earlier in the show, the Panthers won game 2 4-1. We got game 3 taking place on Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. We got game 4 taking place on Saturday. That's also at 8 p.m. And the remaining games 5, 6, and 7, all at the same time of 8 p.m. Those will be taking place on Tuesday, June 18th, Friday, June 21st, and Monday, June 24th. So that's just a quick reminder regarding the NBA Finals and Stanley Cup Final. And of course, to round out the show, we have the UFL Championship game taking place this weekend. We got San Antonio taking on the Birmingham Stallions. I'm still taking Birmingham. They have the better offense, but be sure to tune into that game to see if Wade Phillips can finally win a championship of his own as he and his defense held off the favored St. Louis Battlehawks. The final score there was 25-15. So just keep in mind that the UFL Championship game is also this weekend. That'll be taking place Sunday night. And then I'm just going to wrap it up for another edition of Bando's Breakdowns. Thank you again for tuning in to a wonderful show. I really had a great time doing this with you guys. Before we go, just wanted to quickly remind you once again that this episode is presented by Playback. We also wanted to remind you to please like and subscribe to the ETB network. As I said earlier in the show, you know the drill there. You can listen to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And again, my name is Zain Bando. I'm a sports journalist and ETB network host. And of course, you can catch this show every single week on Wednesdays. And of course, you can catch the MMA Outsiders on Tuesdays. And of course, just for the time being, for the next 12 weeks or so, you can catch every episode of Tough Enough, which is Team Grosso versus Team Shevchenko. And that is every Tuesday night immediately following every episode of the show. So until then, I will see you guys later. And thank you again for tuning in to another edition of Bando's Breakdowns. I'll be back with episode 9, where we will be hopefully recapping what is the NBA Finals and Stanley Cup Final, more combat sports talk, more news and notes in the sports media world, and so much more. So I'll see you guys soon. Have a good one.